It is, okay. Nothing like an 8 a.m. session to get the blood pumping, right?
Yes.
So, are we excited to talk about technology today?
Yes.
Good, I hope so. So, I just want to put out there right now, if you have any questions or need me to slow down or repeat something, please don't hesitate to let me know, shout it out, yell at me, whatever. Heckle me if you feel you must. But because I want to make sure that you know, I want to keep this fairly comfortable, fairly informal for you today, because we are starting at 8 a.m. We're like back at school, right? So today I'm going to, well, first I'll introduce myself. I'm Kate Engelkiss, and I teach English at Ames High School. Hey, I see a long lost friend. So I teach English at Ames High School, and I have loved working with technology since I was a little kid, and my aunt made me play Reader Rabbit and Number Munchers and other games like that when I was growing up. I remember my aunt, actually, she's a professor at Iowa State, Denise Crawford. Some of you may have met her or gone to her session, but I remember she has this piece of writing I did when I was in first grade, and on the writing I said, I was talking about how much I love my Aunt Denise. She's my favorite. My Aunt Denise spelled D-E-N-I-S, and I said, I got a G- in math, so my aunt made me play math games on the computer. So, despite her trying to give me some help in math, I ended up becoming an English teacher. So, but I've loved technology ever since then, and I ended up getting the technology minor when I was an undergrad at Iowa State University. So it's been a real passion area for me, and as I continue to teach, and when Ames High went one-to-one a few years ago, I was incredibly excited because I was able to harness all of the tools that I wanted to harness. But it's been a journey to learn that process. So today I want to give you 5 things that I think you can do to integrate tech in the English classroom. So this is going to be kind of a beginner session. So if you're someone who you're like, hey, I got this down, you know, or some of this might seem familiar to you, you know, write it out or find a different session, because I do want to make this for those of you who maybe are just starting out or you're curious as to how this would look in an English classroom. So I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to give you those 5 tips and give you some examples from my own classroom. So first, I have some resources for you. If you jot down or type up this URL, tinyurl.com/Kengelkiss, K-Engelkiss, presents, I have a website created with links to all of my sessions I've done at iTech, as well as a session that I did last week at our Iowa Council for Teachers of English conference. And so I have all of my keynotes uploaded there, they're PDFs. And then I have links to different resources that I've used to create these. Also, if you're on Twitter, how many of you are on Twitter? Good. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Kengelkiss. So you have to know how to spell my name. All right, I do have this slide at the end, so if you didn't quite get it, you can go back to that. So now, another tiny URL for you. I want you to go to tinyurl.com/KEITech. And this is going to be a little bit of data gathering for me today, as well as something that I'm going to show you later on. How many of you are familiar with Google tools? Feel fairly confident with them? Or are we still a little, we need some help? This is a Google form you're filling out right now. everyone doing on that? Still waiting for it to come on? Are we having internet issues?
Yes.
Oh, this happened yesterday with my presentation. Nobody could get to my links.
Just spinning.
Maybe it just kicked in. Our Wi-Fi is slow to wake up, like many of us.
First time my kids out. It's Friday inside.
Yeah. Try to get that loaded, and I'll show you something really cool hopefully later. But if not, we'll run with it, because that's what happens when we use technology, right? We have to be flexible. All right, so my tip number one, and this is always the scariest thing I think for a lot of English teachers, go paperless. And I think this doesn't apply just to English teachers, it applies to all teachers, really K-12. And one of the questions I ask on that form is, how many of you are a Google school? All right, good. Then this will definitely apply to you today. That was my big concern. So Google Apps for Education are phenomenal, and by far, this is my most used tool in the English classroom. I use Google Docs constantly. I use Google Classroom every single day. How many of you do use Google Classroom? Okay, all right. So if you're not using Google Classroom, I highly suggest using Google Classroom. It has made file management incredibly easy for me. It has made it incredibly easy for students to turn in documents to me. But first, as English teachers or teachers of any sort, we have students do written work. And Google Docs or Google Spreadsheets are some of the best tools you can have for having students turn in that work. So rather than having a million slips of paper, you have their documents online. And I love Google Docs because it allows me to provide really timely, good feedback to my students. The commenting option is fabulous. I use that for commenting on all of my students' papers, and it's really nice too because I can get in and log in while they're working on their work, and I can comment as they go, and it always freaks them out, and I love to see them jump when they see my name pop up and when they see a comment pop up. But it's just a really great way to help make that writing process interactive for students as well, because as they're writing, I can go in and they see that I'm kind of monitoring, or not monitoring in like the big brother sort of way, but monitoring in the, hey, I'm going to help you as you go through this process rather than just at the end. So I have a couple examples here. This one, the student wrote, she had this twist at the end of her story, and so I was like, I like your twist at the end. Your description is intense throughout, but then you totally changed the perspective with your conclusion. And so I love, I don't love always going through and making all of the red marks, oh, you made a mistake marks. But I love highlighting what they're doing well, because if students don't understand what they're doing well, they don't know how to fix what they're doing wrong. So I heard at an ICTE presentation a few years ago, someone talked about golden threads in pieces. And so highlighting their golden lines, those golden threads in their writing, and letting them know, hey, this is awesome. As a reader, I really respond to this line. And that's the example in this instance. This student wrote, in my opinion, I was just about as revolutionary as burnt toast. And I love that line so much. I just like, that is a great line, and it has voice, it has sass in it, and so I love reading that. So I have just this example of a student's, oh, wrong link. Don't have an example of a student's paper. So anyway, Google Docs, one of my best tools, one of my go-to tools. I use it every single day in my classroom with all of my classes. That leads me to Google Classroom, because prior to Classroom last year, it was a mess. If you used Google Docs before Google Classroom existed, you understand how do you organize all of those documents. Students are sharing millions of documents with you, and you're going, what the heck? Do I create a shared folder and then have them put it in there? What do I do? And so it was really difficult to manage those files. And Google Classroom has made it incredibly easy to manage files. So I use Classroom with all of my classes, and it is just a really easy way. You create a stream, you create assignments, I can post announcements. Just yesterday, and the internet's not, or the Wi-Fi's not going to work for me today. But just yesterday I created a video because I was like, oh, my AP students need a little something for the day, and so I made a video and posted that there. It's just a great resource for them too because they know exactly where they need to go for any assignment. They don't have to search, now they don't even have to search through their drive for an assignment. They can go right to Google Classroom and it's right there. It's nice too because if parents are concerned about what's going on or what assignments are happening or what they're missing, then I just say, hey, your child has access to that. And the parent can log on using the student's email and password and get that information right there. So it makes that communication really easy as well.
How does it function with your drive?
How does it function with Drive?
Yeah.
It's connected. If the Wi-Fi was working for me, I could show you how I would add an assignment. But it's really easy because when you hit, there's a plus sign in the lower right-hand corner, and when you click that, it comes up with, you could have an announcement, you could put, here's my AP. So you hit that plus sign, you can add an assignment, an announcement, a question now is another option that they give you. So you see right here, you can reuse a post that you previously used. Another function that I really like as well is if you want to move something up, you can now move it to the top because sometimes it would get lost because it's just a stream, right? I love that they did that. And what's nice too is Google Classroom. Google is listening to teachers. So when teachers provide feedback and they say, hey, we really want this, like one of the options was they didn't have a co-teaching option. And so if you're co-teaching with a special ed teacher or any other teacher, you would have to log into each other's email. But now you can have a co-teacher, so that's really nice. So I'll create an assignment. We'll do a test and we'll really freak out my AP students. But there's that drive icon right there, and then it automatically opens up to your ability to search your drive. And then you can just search in there, find whatever document you've created, and then add that right there. So I will actually print them out. And then you would just hit assign. You can change the due date, you can change the time if you want to make it at night or by the end of class or whatever. And then also you can select multiple sections. So if you have multiple sections of a course that they're all using the same assignment, you can select that. But it seamlessly integrates with Drive. So that's really nice. And then when students turn in an assignment, if you haven't used Classroom, it collects all of their assignments right there. So that gets rid of that need for the shared folders and the millions of assignments because they're all right there located under that assignment. All right. So yeah, I love Google Classroom, and I'll show you another powerful tool a little later to go along with Classroom. Okay, so that's my tip one. Go paperless. It's not as difficult as, and I used this kind of pun last night. Sometimes you can't go paperless. It just is important to go paperless. Because sometimes you do need to print something out. Like sometimes if I have a poem I want my students to analyze and I know that they're going to have googly fingers as they're looking over that poem, I'll say, all right, we're keeping the computer shut today and I just want to know your brain. I don't want to know Google's brain, I want to know your brain. And so sometimes you do need that paper in class. Some people would disagree, but I think sometimes you do. But I use very, very little paper. Very, very little paper in my classroom. And so if, as an English teacher, I can do this, I think any teacher can do this. And for me, it just makes it so much easier. All right, so my tip number 2, make use of data gathering. We want to be responsive teachers. We want to be responsive to what our students are needing for instruction. And so we need ways to gather that data that's easier than, looking over a million slips of paper, right? So Google Forms, you filled out that Google form, maybe. But what's really nice with Google Forms is it makes a great exit ticket. It makes a great bell ringer for students. You can just find out what they're getting from what you've learned in class right at that moment. And so they fill out that form. They're super easy to make. And then it collects all of the data into a spreadsheet for you. So, once again, maybe I want the wrong internet. The wrong iPhone. So it now creates visuals in Google Forms as well. It creates a visual of the results, the responses that you get from students, as well as you can go to a spreadsheet and then see right there what students have written down. So Google Forms, easy, quick way to gather data from students on what they're understanding or misunderstanding. This is going to be a rough one. The next one, I guess I'll skip Kahoot for now and I'll talk about Rubric. How many of you have used or heard of Rubric before? Have you used it? Right? I showed Rubric to a bunch of new teachers that hadn't used Rubric before, and they were like, "Whoa!" It is my best friend now, and I just started using it. So, as a little caveat, I do have on my resources page, I have a step-by-step tutorial for how to use Rubric. I used the tutorial through Google Classroom because prior to Google Classroom, Rubric and Doctopus were impossible to use. But now with Google Classroom, they're integrated. It's very, very easy to use. So Rubric is essentially a way for you to attach rubrics to student documents and grade right in an electronic document. So gone are the days where you had to create your rubric, copy and paste it in, highlight the categories, and then type at the end. That was incredibly arduous. So like I said, there's a step-by-step instruction on how to do this, but since I already have this pulled up and since my Wi-Fi is not working today, I'll just show you this. So step-by-step tutorial, there are a lot of steps leading up to this moment. It seems kind of difficult at first, but after you do a few run-throughs of these steps, very easy to use, and it's really intuitive because it prompts you the next step. So Doctopus is essentially a data gathering extension, and so you'll need two extensions on your Google Drive, Doctopus and Rubric. Doctopus and Rubric. And Doctopus essentially gathers the assignments together into a spreadsheet. It creates a roster for you. And since you already have a roster in Google Classroom, it's very easy because you ingest your Google Classroom roster into a Google spreadsheet that you create. And then from there, Rubric, you attach a rubric you've created to that document. And then once you ingest all of them, you see we have a link to the students' papers. Yep, it's one of those. So, once you get to the student's document, you'll see I clicked on this little googly eye. If you have the Rubric extension, this googly eye will appear in the URL bar, and then you would click on that, and it would take you to a beautiful document with the students writing, as you can see, and at the top is your rubric, and it has a place to enter point values, and so however many points your rubric is worth, each of the categories appears, and then, which would look really cool right now, and then from there you just enter in the scores, and then add comments, and you can email those responses directly to students so they can get that response immediately, that feedback immediately from you. And then also it pastes it at the end of their document. So I've used this with student papers, I've used this with speeches. This is my first year using it with speeches. That was really helpful because I was like, I want to know how they're progressing with their speaking abilities. I need to have that information, and if I just have it on a rubric and I have a final score that doesn't tell me anything, because I hand those back to the students. And rather than keeping track of binders full of rubrics, it's all right here. So I decided to do that with speech rubrics as well this year. So what's really nice then is you can go in and then you have all of your categories, and then you can go scroll down and see, oh, we have some students who are having issues with organization. I'm going to grab those students. So all of their scores are in one location, and then you can pull those students who need that extra instruction. So Rubric, make Rubric your best friend. It's incredibly powerful, incredibly helpful, and a great way to make your classroom responsive to your students. Okay, the last one I wanted to show you was Kahoot. Has anyone done a Kahoot quiz before? If you have, fun, right? Really fun. Students love Kahoot, but also it can be a data gathering tool for you because it lets you know student responses. So while it's super fun for them, it can also be incredibly informative for you. I don't know if this is going to work for us today. I did create a really silly Kahoot quiz for you. So if it works, awesome, but I have a sneaking suspicion it's not going to. I wonder if there's like a black hole here. Yeah.
I was just going to say, my daughter's getting married this summer. We're going to do a Kahoot at the reception. With trivia from her and her fiance's growing up.
What a
That is
great
a
idea.
fabulous idea. That is a fabulous idea for using a Kahoot. I love that. Well, it's really cool because you would join in using your device, you would type in your name, it would appear on the screen, and then we'd get to our questions, and it's multiple choice. You can also create surveys, you can create a discussion starter using Kahoot. So there are different ways you can use Kahoot, but it's a great formative assessment piece. It's a great test review. A lot of people use it with test review, and it's really fun. The students get really into it, mostly because there's this timer, and it counts down, and there's music, and they're like, ah! And then it shows up with who got the correct answer, and it shows a leaderboard. So you have a winner. So there's competition there, and they're super motivated with competition. So
Yeah, almost too motivated.
almost too motivated. It's very true.
There's almost every time, on every question, there's some kid, as soon as they log in their answer, they go, oh, we hit the wrong one! Just because they were in such a hurry to be the first.
I know. So that's where, you know.
So you have to use it often enough that you don't.
Exactly. Because yeah, if it's that novelty, you know, ooh, we're doing a Kahoot, then yeah, they go crazy with it. Well, this would have been really fun and cool.
I like it.
So, we'll move on, and if it appears later, awesome. We'll take our Kahoot. So like I said, if you're interested in Rubric and using that, I have a step-by-step tutorial posted to my website. So that should help you. All right, number 3, find go-to resources. Find resources you can use to implement things in classroom, resources that students can go to and search for things. These are a few of my favorites, and you may have used other ones, and if you have other resources, let me know. Newsella is fabulous. It is news, current event stuff, and then what's also amazing is you can change the Lexile level. So depending on the level of your students, you can change the Lexile to fit them. Or even give students in the same class, maybe with differing abilities, the same article, so they're reading the same thing, they're getting the same content, they're just reading it at their level. So you could have seen Newsella.
What Wi-Fi network are you on?
The iTech,
But are you on the iTech Fred? Because that was working.
the iTech what is working?
Fred, the Fred. Yeah. And the password's the same thing.
Okay. Thank you. Now we're gonna see some neat things.
Hopefully.
Right. It's gonna say, no, we won't allow you. All right, let's see. Newsella.
Almost everyone just
Right, everyone switches now and is like, no! Well, we'll continue to go on, and then we'll see if it works. So, Newsella, like I said, really nice current event stuff, news stuff, it's great. Brevity Mag is another really cool source. This is for short, creative nonfiction pieces. So it has some really great things, really creative pieces, a great way to find models for your students in creative nonfiction. And there are a lot of independent writers or smaller writers that submit to Brevity Mag. I've had a couple of professors at UNI who have pieces on Brevity Mag. So that's really neat. So yeah. Poets.org. I've been to the Poetry Foundation before, and that's a great website, and it has some teacher resources as well. But this summer, I really fell in love with Poets.org. Well, for one, it just looks really funky. It looks really cool. So there's aesthetic there. But also, it has some really great videos with interviews from poets that are really, really interesting. Naomi Shihab Nye has a couple pieces on teaching poetry that are super powerful to listen to as teachers. So Poets.org, really great resource for you as a teacher, but also I love telling students, hey, go find a poem. Go find a poem you like and you want to look at, you want to analyze. And so I'll send them to Poets.org or Poetry Foundation. And then the other source is Poetry 180. How many of you know about Poetry 180? Poetry 180 is the best. So Billy Collins, who is a former US Poet Laureate, he kind of started this tradition of poet laureates having a project that they do to spread poetry to the masses. Yay, internet! So what he did was he created a list of 180 poems for teachers. And the impetus was teachers would read one of these poems each day of school. So 180, when we were following school days rather than hours, it was one poem a day for the entire school year. And so it's just a list of poems, and you can find the list. This is a great resource I send my students to as well. My students do a poetry analysis project where then they have to, and I'll show you this, they have to create a comic representation of the poem, and I send them to this source. So all the lists of poems, the links are all right there, and it's good stuff. So Poetry 180. I would read you some poetry right now, but I won't bore you. Some of you like that. Some of you like that. All right. So those are some of my go-to resources. Anyone else have others that they wanted to share with everyone? All right. We'll go at the end. We'll see if we can go back to the Kahoot. We'll keep pushing forward now. All right. Number 4. This is my favorite one. Do something with digital literacy. And I have a presentation, not to plug myself, but I have a presentation later today on digital literacy. If you're interested in finding out more about what I do in my classroom with this, some of it will be repeated from this presentation. So things like podcasting, things like comics, things like digital storytelling, I think those are incredibly powerful mediums for our students. Because there's power in the written word, but then when students have to think about bringing to life that written word, in the power of an author's voice in reading his or her own work, it changes the nature of a piece, and it changes their understanding of what it means to create. And with our culture being so incredibly visual, it's important that students understand how to read and understand visuals, as well as create a message using visuals. So our first one, podcasting, isn't with visuals, but I contend that audio is not dead. Some people think, oh, radio audio, it's dead, it's gone, it's out. No, false. NPR has so many cool things going on with radio shows that are really great, actually great things for even students to consume. Not necessarily create, but even just consuming. So StoryCorps, do we have any StoryCorps fans in here? Okay, StoryCorps, oh man, it's the coolest. StoryCorps is a project, and NPR plays these stories, but basically there are booths around America. There's one in New York, there's one in Chicago, and then they have a mobile unit that goes around. And people go into these booths and they interview someone they have a relationship with or they know or whatever, and they interview that person. And they have this great conversation, and then StoryCorps winnows it down to like a good 2-3 minute piece about from like the stuff that came out from the interview. Because interview you want to get a ton of information and then winnow it down to the golden parts. So StoryCorps condenses those down, and then on Fridays on IPR at like 7:30 in the morning, so as I'm driving to school, they play that week's StoryCorps, and it's always a tearjerker. Like I'm always pulling into school with tears streaming down my face, and I'm like, StoryCorps, why? You've done it to me again. And so they're super powerful stories, and they really show just slices of what it's like, what we're like as humans, what it's like to be in a relationship as humans. And what they do is they archive these stories in the Library of Congress, and so future generations can hear stories from today. So it's a really powerful project. And what's super awesome is there's an app, a StoryCorps app, that it has all of the interview questions and that sort of thing, and so you can put together an interview with these questions and record right in the app, and you can send it off to StoryCorps if you want to. So we have this tool in our hands, which is awesome. So I want to share a really funny story with you, and then it takes a turn because StoryCorps, of course, can't let you hear a story without crying. But there are tons of really good ones. There's one about Danny, I think it's Danny and Annie. It's this adorable couple that just makes me bawl every time I listen to it, so I keep listening to it. But so these are really fun for students to listen to because it's that power of story. And so one of my coworkers, he uses StoryCorps as a model for a project he does with his seniors that I really wish I was part of that project, but I don't teach seniors. And so what they do is they listen to some StoryCorps stories, and then they have to interview a family member. And then they winnow it down to a couple minutes. And he has a website called, I think it's still up, Story County Stories. It's a Story County Stories project. And they will play some of the best ones on our local radio station every year. So it's a really neat project. And students, they'll interview parents. There was one student I know, she interviewed her dad, and she was asking how her parents met, and so he was talking about that. And then he goes into this, like, I really want this for you. And he starts giving her this advice that she'd never had this conversation like this with her dad before.